Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Zinat Rahman, and I'm the Executive Director of the Institute of Politics. We are so pleased to welcome you to a conversation between new University of Chicago President Paul Alivisatos and IOP Founding Director David Axelrod. We know that this has been a difficult day, and we have resources on site should any attendees need to speak with somebody after the program. Before one of our students formally introduces President Alivisatos in a few minutes, I would like to mention a couple of upcoming events that we have this week at the IOP and go over some housekeeping notes. So on Wednesday, November 10th, current IOP Pritzker Fellow Tony Fabrizio, who was former President Donald Trump's pollster, and John Anzalone, who is President Biden's pollster, will unpack the election results in Virginia, New Jersey, and elsewhere, and look ahead to the 2022 midterms. So that's on Wednesday. On Thursday, November 11th, Eric Garcia, who's a journalist and author of We're Not Broken, Changing the Autism Conversation, and former IOP Pritzker Fellow Tim Alberta, who's a staff writer for The Atlantic, will be joining us to discuss the research and misperceptions surrounding autism and other disabilities. Audience questions. So after the moderated discussion, we'll open the floor to take questions. You'll see mics along the side. Please remember, everyone's welcome to the microphone. Please keep your mask on when you're asking your questions. And as usual, we will give priority to student questions. And if you could please make sure your phones are on silent. We will now hear the formal introductions of our speakers from Annie Henderson, who's a first-year MPP student at the Harris School of Public Policy. Annie chairs the IOP Chicago-style student-led speaker series. Prior to coming to the University of Chicago, Annie worked in technology and finance. Please join me in welcoming Annie to the podium.
Good evening and welcome. I'm pleased tonight to introduce two very special University of Chicago alumni. Although both of them pursued their undergraduate careers here at the college, they have since gone on two completely different paths. President Paul Alivisatos grew up in Chicago and Greece. He's a renowned scientist and entrepreneur focused on nanotechnology, especially applications in biomedical and energy sciences. Before returning to Chicago, he spent many years at the University of California, Berkeley, where he founded the Kavli Energy Nanosciences Institute. He also served as the provost of the university. President Alivisatos has promised to spend his tenure listening. Tonight, however, we are the ones who get to hear. We get to hear his thoughts on growing up under military rule in Greece, the university's future, and the importance of open debate. Facilitating tonight's program is the IOP founding director, David Axelrod. Before founding the IOP, Mr. Axelrod was a senior advisor to former President Barack Obama. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, President Alivisatos. Thank you for being here. Your wife, Nicole, welcome to both of you. Back to Chicago.
Welcome back. Yeah.
You know, there's so much to talk about, but it turns out that this is a very busy and tragic day here, and we appreciate the time you can give us because we've had some violent incidents, one at Harper Court, where I don't think there were injuries, but shootings out at and around Harper Court, and the other was a shooting just north of the campus on 54th Street, in which tragically someone did lose their lives. And I was wondering first what you could tell us about this.
Yeah, thank you, David. It is a tragic day, and unfortunately, as you said, the violence hit our community with the Harper Court incident, and then also at 54th and Ellis, a recent alum of the university was tragically killed. So yeah, it's a terrible day, and we're reaching out to the family now, and we'll have more information about the shooting in due course. But I also, just a little while ago, was able to speak directly with Mayor Lightfoot. I had already met with her last week to discuss the issues that we've been dealing with around this ongoing public health crisis, epidemic of violence. and how we could work together more. And we were starting to explore our options for things that we could do together. In the call today, she mentioned to me that the investigation, the CPD investigation is extremely active, and also reiterated her support to work with us to try to work together to find more approaches to dealing with this horrific violence. So I'm heartened by that, and we'll be speaking again tomorrow. This morning, I was at an event at the Crown Family School, where Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra came to the campus, and we were the hosts, but we were the hosts of a dozen Bronzeville community leaders. These are people who have dedicated their lives to working in their communities. And they've been working with us in partnership to reduce violence. And so that was the topic of our discussion. We spent an hour and a half together, and a very productive discussion to try to see how community members from our nearby communities and the university can work together, how we can be supported by our city officials and by the state and by the federal government. And I just want people here to know that we're going to do everything we can to try to help achieve the public safety that we all need in order to be able to engage in our work here and do the amazing and important work that we do. So it's a tough day.
Tough day. You know, you and I were talking before we came out. We were here roughly at the same time. It pains me to say I was here before you were here, a bit younger than you, a bit older than you, but
At a certain point, the differences become very small.
yes, yeah, spoken like a true scientist. But it was striking then as students that the answer to this problem, which was a problem then, was to treat the university community as kind of an island.
Yes.
And encircle it.
Yes.
That proved not to be a good answer.
No.
You know, as we were saying, and as you were just saying, this is a public health problem, and just as the pandemic was a public health problem, we throw everything at pandemics. And the question is, how do we, all the good ideas that you talked about with Secretary Becerra, all the good ideas you talk about with the mayor, you know, how do we scale them up? How do we make them adequate to the challenge? And you spoke eloquently at your inauguration about engagement. This is part of it.
It is. Well, you know, when Nicole and I made the decision to come back, it was partly because we knew that there was a long history of the university with the community that wasn't thought through well. It wasn't the right approach. And you just mentioned it, of trying to be an island. And instead, what we really need to recognize is that we have a creative, resilient community around us, and they want to be partners with us. We want to be partners with them to find approaches to really help lift us up. And to your point about scaling, I think there's a lot more that we can do, but we can't do it alone. And I mentioned already the university, the community members, and all the different parts of the government. But I also want to say that I think all of the stakeholders in our society need to be a part of this conversation, all of them. And by that I mean we have many community organizations, nonprofit groups, but we also have a lot of private companies and others. And I want to invite them to be in a dialogue with us about how to lift up our communities and do it together, create a knowledge economy around us that helps and that is a positive part of helping us through these terrible moments. So on the one hand, we have to do things in the short term that help us address the security situation, and I'll be coming back to the community to describe a number of steps that we'll be taking on that front. But I think this other conversation, what you just said, that when there's a pandemic, we mobilize the resources, and yet this is like that, and we need to also mobilize the resources. We will be, our community, we're going to put a lot of effort into this.
Yeah, I think too often we start by limiting our ability to address the problem because we say, well, we can only do incremental.
We can only do so much,
things.
right?
And that's not helpful.
No, I think we have to really be ambitious in our thinking in terms of how to work together in the nearby community and what we can achieve. And also, we have to ask others to partner with us.
Yes, well, you're quite right.
Because it's a problem for our whole society. It's not like it's a problem for one part of society and not for the rest. It's for all of us to work together on. Just as we do when there's a crisis like a pandemic, we're better when we all come together.
Absolutely. Well, you're not a stranger to Chicago. You not only were a student at the University of Chicago, but you were born in Chicago. Because we're just getting to know you.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about that and about your childhood and your family. And I know that it took a turn. So
it did.
Talk about all of it.
Yeah. So indeed, I was born on the near north side. My family, my father was a refugee from the Civil War in Greece and had come through, he couldn't get into the United States directly. He came to Canada first and then eventually found his way to the United States and was educated, became a physician, and had been recruited actually to the Mount Sinai Hospital here in Chicago, which is where he was working. He had met my mother in New York, and they had moved here together. And so we were born on the near north side and lived there. My sister, older than me, almost 5 years older than me, and lived there we lived in that area and a little bit in Evanston until I was 10 years old. Unfortunately, my mother died then, and so we were sent to Greece, where we then lived as teenagers.
Yeah, when I do this podcast called the Axe Files, I won't go all Axe Files on you, but that must have been very tough.
It was, although it was tough. But I will say also to have the opportunity to grow up in two completely different cultures, and to experience that as a young person, actually was, at the time hard, but in life, it was an extraordinary opportunity to live in two such different cultures. And I think as a young person to be able to see, to try to experience what a different culture is from the one that you're normally in. I think once you've seen that, how different two cultures can be, it makes you more aware of the fact that the things that we take for granted about our own environment, how specific they can be to the culture that we've grown up in. I think for me, it was a really enlightening experience, and got a great education when I was a student there. So many, many good things came from it.
One of the things that we sometimes take for granted is democracy, which is something that we at the Institute of Politics talk about a lot. You arrived in Greece at a very momentous time. There was a military junta.
Yes.
You lived through a period of military tribunals, of political parties being banned, of censorship, of secret police torture of political opponents.
Yeah.
Talk about that and protests in response to it, but how does that shape your thinking about about democracy?
Well, first of all, let me say that even as a young person in school, it shaped everything. The fact that there wasn't freedom just shaped everything, because people all knew that what they said could land them in trouble. And so it was a kind of closing in, a circumscription that just felt terrible. And as students, we knew that. And it was also just a very, this period of time, there was a struggle going on in the society, and as young people, we would hear pieces of it. Of course, none of it was in the media. It was possible to occasionally get a hold of a Western magazine. I remember occasionally being able to see like a Time or a Newsweek magazine. And you read through it and try to see, is there anything about green? And often there would be something that would say things that would, none of that information was available internally, impossible to find.
Yeah. You didn't check Facebook, huh?
I couldn't check Facebook. So that was all there, and there was a period as the dictatorship progressed when the university students really took on the battle to get back to democracy. So we followed that closely as youngsters, and I may have found my way to one or two of those events.
There are probably photos somewhere in some
Maybe, I
archive
doubt
somewhere.
it. You wouldn't recognize me anyway. I had a lot of hair, and things were different.
I admire anybody who has a lot of hair,
Yeah,
to be honest with you. What drew you back to the University of Chicago?
Oh, golly. Well, I knew I wanted to come back to the United States pretty much the whole time, so that was part of the plan. But I had a math teacher. As I was approaching the stage of looking at colleges, I had a math teacher who said that, pulled me aside one day and said, you should really look at the University of Chicago. That you would kind of fit there. And this was somebody I really admired a lot. So that was a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And your dad, I guess, wasn't that thrilled by that, right? I read somewhere that he wanted you to be a physician like him and study in Greece.
Yeah, no, the whole family was mounting a pretty intense become a doctor campaign that lasted for a long time.
Yeah.
Actually, it lasted all the way, to be honest with you, it was still a sore point until I became a professor at Berkeley, and then they sort of just figured, this is hopeless.
Yeah. Well, I come from a Jewish immigrant family, so I can
can relate
sense of how these things work. What did you find here as you look back now? I mean, you have an interesting vantage point because you were a student, and now you're the.
Yeah, it was amazing, all the way from. I was placed in the Shoreland Hotel. That was the base there. And it was the first year, I think it was the first year it was open. Anyway, there were only 2 floors that were the dormitory. The rest of it was a single room occupancy hotel for elderly, rather impoverished residents. So here we were, 2 floors of kind of 17, 18, 19-year-olds, and then all these other folks. We got to know each other. But everything was amazing about it. I had so many amazing classmates who exposed me to all different kinds of ways of thinking that I had never known about. And then also, the classes were incredible. That core curriculum was profound. And my first week, we were studying one of the Plato dialogues, and second week there was a paper due. I handed it in, and it came back covered in red, it's just like completely shredded by the professor. And at the end was a little note saying, well, don't get too discouraged. There's a chance this could get better.
Don't get too discouraged. You may be president of this university.
Well, no, I don't think so. That wasn't the implication.
And when did you decide that chemistry was your future?
Oh, gee, I was on and off about that because I liked the sciences, and chemistry was kind of a way to also make it so that my family felt there was still a chance that I could become a doctor as part of a negotiation. So I started down that road, and then in year 2, I had organic chemistry, which didn't agree with me very much, or I didn't agree with it. We didn't do well together, organic chemistry and I. It was actually a really bad experience, and so I was hightailing it out of there, and then actually, another classmate about a year later came back and said, I understand that you didn't like that very much, but I'm certain you will like the physical chemistry class. And it's the kind of place where, most people would have laughed at that, but it actually, I took it pretty seriously because this is somebody who really knew me pretty well. And so I took the class and I loved it. Mm-hmm. And that was it.
And you went off to Berkeley to get a doctorate, and you focused in your thesis and in your career after on nanotechnology. Mm-hmm. I am way out of I'm going to have to refer to my notes here because there was no aspect of chemistry that I thrived in here at the university, but you're credited, this is the study of how energy is transferred, this is what you wrote about, from molecules to solids. It led you to these nanocrystals, which are the entities that lie between
molecules and solids,
and molecules. I'm doing okay so
far. That's pretty good, yeah.
I did study.
I'm not sure it makes sense to anybody else, but that is actually what happened, yeah.
I did study reading here, so. And you've had an extraordinary career in this field that has real implications for the world around us. You're credited with developing and harnessing these nanocrystals for important commercial and societal purposes, medical diagnostics, electronic technology, and renewable energy, such as solar panels. And in your inaugural speech, you talked a lot about the power of science and technology to improve humanity, to deal with some of the big problems that we face. I wanted to ask you this question. As a Luddite, I want to ask you a question as a scientist. It's all churning at an exponential rate. Mm-hmm. Do you have concerns about our inability to get our arms around all the implications of our discoveries on society? I think of it because I'm very focused on social media and the implications for our democracy. But I'm sure there are all kinds of other, we're with AI coming online and so on. How do we harness the benefits of science and within the parameters of, what's best for society?
Well, look, this is always, any technology, as you know, as it gets developed, has the potential to do great good. It can be misused and do things, or inadvertently do things that are not good, that we don't intend, and that story is one that sometimes repeats itself all too often. In some ways, I have to say, I've been more encouraged about how, as a society, in some ways we've gotten better at this. For example, when the CRISPR-Cas9 technologies for genome editing were invented, the scientists said time out and immediately held an international conference to think about the implications of that, to set some guidelines for it. And indeed, I think those have been reasonably effective. So I think at the level of, at that kind of level, we can do well with things. But as you know, there's a big disconnect. It's manifest during the pandemic. There's an enormous disconnect between the state of our knowledge and what science can guide us to do, and our ability sometimes as societies to understand and comprehend that. And I think a university like this one does and has to play a vital role in that. So part of an engaged university is about being in that discussion in a substantive and determined way to try to help people to comprehend what's coming out of science, and also to help to guide us in how we can use the science responsibly.
Yeah.
I will say the sense of the exponential, I also did refer there to what I think, present here are a lot of people who will be the first generation that will essentially have a kind of overarching stewardship of our planet in a different way than people have conceived of before. There'll be environmental engineers of our planet at some level, whether we want to be or not. We surely need good science tools to help us start to think on that scale and be able to do things on that scale that will help us manage through what looks like to be a really difficult climate crisis.
You were the director of the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab for years. You succeeded a guy I worked with in the administration, Stephen Chu, who was the Secretary of Energy.
I did.
What is your level of concern over to optimism about climate change and our ability to deal with it in time? And this is another place where politics and societal duress, I guess, kind of collide with the imperatives that we hear from scientists.
Sure. Well, yesterday I had the great pleasure to visit the social sciences division and travel all around this university's social science. And I have to say, one of the things that we talked about with the community there was the degree to which, for us to really do a good job of trying to handle the climate crises that are upon us, that we're in the midst of already. We probably need more advances in the social sciences and more engagement in that area than the sciences at this point. I mean, we do have a number of technical approaches to hand, but we're struggling to get those to be implemented and to find the policies and the understanding to be able to get those to happen. So I think we have to imagine essentially, every part of a great university is going to be part of thinking about this challenge in the coming years. You asked me about optimism versus pessimism.
I asked with hope.
Yeah, well, I'm an optimistic person by nature, and I know that we have a lot of technical approaches already that we could bring to bear, and I also know that there are more technical things that we could invent that can help. So I'm on the optimistic side that we'll manage our way through it, but there will be a lot of dislocation along the way, and I think the more we try to really put our minds to it and our will to it, the sooner the better. No question about that.
Listen, the dislocation, I think, is where the social scientists come in, because I'm always mindful of the fact, I think everyone in this room probably views climate as an existential crisis, and you've spent 30 years in California, so you certainly understand and see, even if you weren't a scientist, all you have to do is look out your window. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but I also understand that if you are someone who's made your living, and your father before you and mother before, if your family has made its living in old energy, that the disappearance of it can be an existential crisis too. Mm-hmm. So the question is, how do you involve people in the solution in a way that doesn't make it feel as if their job is to sacrifice for the greater good, and all of us who don't have to sacrifice are the ones telling them that.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I agree with that completely. I mean, what I will say is that the new energy technologies that we have to hand, and those that we can still create, can really be ones that have widespread benefits, not just in terms of the experience of not having to deal with the climate crisis, but also jobs, and those can be very widespread. And for example, it would be terrific if communities that are reliant on various forms of the fossil extraction and so on, there are a lot of ways they could be part of benefiting through jobs that are associated with renewable energies or other technologies that we're going to need to deal with the climate crisis. So that's the business I hope we can get to.
Yeah,
of course.
We're actually
People have been trying for a while, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, we're going to do an event in the next quarter with people who are working on this issue and trying to bridge the divide on this climate issue. I think the core is do the new jobs pay as well as the old jobs, and that I think is the barrier to a lot of the people who
Fair enough.
Who are.
I am excited that there's a, not plugging any specific company, but I'm excited that there's a factory just nearby here in Normal, Illinois.
Yes.
Making some really interesting new electric vehicles.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting.
Yes, yes. Let's talk a little bit about the role of universities. And I was interested that you spent a couple of years at Bell Labs.
Mm-hmm.
Bell Labs is like a legendary place.
Yeah.
And it was legendary because as a monopoly, they had the luxury of funding basic science to a degree that big public corporations don't today or won't because of the tyranny of the quarterly report. Are universities now
the new Bell Labs?
The new Bell Labs?
Well, first of all, I do want to say one thing. So when I was a young scientist there, having graduated with my PhD, I went there. You're right. It was, how I say it, so it was this, in New Jersey, this giant sprawling kind of building with all these corridors. And, I can just remember every time I would walk into that place, it just felt like distilled energy. It was just such an electric environment because there were all of these people there who were thinking together in really interesting ways. It was a really special environment.
A lot of Nobel Prize winners came out of Bell Labs.
There were. It was a special place. But there were also aspects to it that were, not as terrific. For example, partly because it was a monopoly, and so there was this kind of sense that you could just do things, which was terrific. But the sense of wanting to, the scientists there would kind of be almost compete for who could do the things that would be the most not useful for the communications industry as kind of a mark of purity or something, Yeah. It's a funny environment that way. I do think that in the years since then, our ability to create new technologies has taken other forms. It's taken other forms. So I wouldn't be discouraged by it. I would say there are other institutions in society that play that role. And certainly the universities are very special in that regard. And there's been a big change in how that works. The whole ability for universities to be involved either through the small startup companies and also through partnerships with larger companies have opened up a way for that kind of energy of new ideas to find their way into the marketplace in new ways. And I will also make a plug for the national labs like Argonne and Fermilab.
Yes.
Because they're also playing a big role in this. So, what had been one structure in society, I think we were able to find others that ultimately play similar roles. They're not identical, but they're still there. And we have the ability, when we want to take technology, to create new technologies and to make them available to the marketplace. There are a lot of ways to do that, and I think universities are very special in that ecosystem. And
I want to commend you for making a smooth transition to touting Fermi and Argonne and not the Berkeley labs in your remarks here, so that you're fully installed here.
I'm learning.
Yes, that's good. That's good.
My face mask is maroon. I'm getting there.
I'm not going to ask what's in the other pocket.
Don't.
You actually, you're an example of this. You have 50 patents, and you were involved with some startup companies. How does that work? Because you basically
Besides
you've
being
been
a blast and really fun, how does it work?
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I know this is common now, and
yeah. Well, through trial and error. I know in my case at least, when we had some developments in the laboratory that looked like they had that potential, we reached out to others and became part of a group that did this. So I've had a few technologies become ones that are actually used a lot, maybe a couple that didn't make it. So a variety of experiences of that kind. I mean, for me, I always knew that I would stay in the research side and not be in the commercial, actual companies.
Why was that?
Because my mind always travels back to wanting to understand the reasons why. Because of my education at the University of Chicago, which really came in, in a deep way. So whenever I encounter a situation, that's what I start doing, is trying to go down a few layers and understand, well, why does that happen? And that's where my mind gravitates. And actually, when you're out there in the commercial world, sometimes the issues you have to resolve are practical ones, and you've just got to sort of go with, this is how it works, it's good enough, I'm going. And that, that's not. So you have to know your own role in the ecosystem that's there for taking new ideas and having them go out into the world. So in my case, for example, I've stayed involved with some of the companies that are out there because I'm useful to them, because when I show up, I ask them why, and they need somebody to still do that for them. But I wouldn't be very good inside those companies. You have to know that. You have to kind of have a sense of where you belong in that ecosystem.
So in moving along, in terms of the sense of where you belong, what you made a transition, you ran the lab, and then ultimately you became provost at the University of California, at Berkeley. What provoked you to want to be in academic administration? I will just tell you this story. I had a client, I won't name him, who at the end of his career, I said, gee, you ought to be a president of a university. And he took a step back. He said, I'm trying to get out of politics. So tell me what drew you to academic leadership?
Well, okay, so first of all, let me say what drew me to any kind of leadership was a path along the science route. So at a certain point, we had learned how to make materials, and we wanted to be able to share that with others. And I became involved in a group project to create what became the Molecular Foundry, which is a big entity that shares science. It's a place where instead of just reading things from papers, you can go and in a lab share ideas, create materials at the molecular scale, so Molecular Foundry. And when I did that, I was working with many other scientists and learning about their ideas, and we were all trying to share, and I loved that. That was a great feeling. And when I was at the lab, it was a similar kind of experience where every day in a leadership position, every day I had a rule at Lawrence Berkeley Lab that I would have at least one period of time during the day when I would learn something completely new about science. And for like 7 years, almost 8 years, every day, there was something in that lab that could teach me something new about science. When I returned to the campus and became on the Berkeley campus, it was that same feeling. I'm having it right now here at this university. I have this enormously wonderful moment where I get to go visiting all the different parts of the university. Like yesterday when I was in the social science division, it was just like this massive learning about what people are doing and being in awe of it and just getting a big kick out of it. So, I mean, to me, that's what leads me to wanting to do it, is it puts me in contact with every way of thinking about human knowledge. It's like, it's a turbocharged experience.
What's the difference between playing that role at a public university and playing that role at a private university?
Well, I would say that the public universities have this very special role in our world of providing access at a larger scale. I will say that we don't have quite the same commitment to public higher education that I believe it truly merits. So I really think that what the public universities achieve, the great public research universities like a Berkeley, but there are many others, they are places of enormous resilience where people committed to human knowledge also stay committed to making it available to the public, despite a lot of challenges and failures of public policy. And I would say in a truly great private university like this one, I think it creates enormous benefits for society as well. It's just scaled down a little bit. It can't quite reach that same enormous scale, but the quality level is enormously high. And what's inspiring to me about it is that all the stakeholders, from students through the alums, staff, faculty, trustees, all the stakeholders have a kind of a commitment to making this creation and sharing of knowledge something that will thrive. And that's a great thing. There's not this kind of situation where some of the stakeholders are a little bit hesitant to do what I think they really ought to be.
And would that be more likely to happen in a public?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think so. I mean, it's just a challenge we have right now in our society where that kind of sense of how to have the public committed to its great public research universities is shaky.
So we can't sit at the University of Chicago, and actually you can't come from Berkeley without at least some discussion about free expression.
Yeah.
And tell me, because you had your experiences as provost, I know there were some high-profile speakers who came that probably challenged you as an administrator.
Well, we made sure they could speak, no matter what. Yeah.
So tell me what you think. Tell me why that's so important, and where do you? What are the parameters? How do you?
Well, I think it's truly fundamental to a university. And, you asked me at the beginning about my experiences in a dictatorship, where people couldn't speak. So it's not something, this doesn't feel like something entirely theoretical to me. I mean, it's a deeply important thing. And I think it is the foundation of great universities, is that people are able to speak the thoughts that are on their mind. Now, one of the things I find wonderful here is that that people engage in a dialogue and a challenge. You can have an idea, and maybe it's your idea, but it's mistaken. Then okay, we can have that debate and go back and forth on it. But I think it is fundamental to the ability of the university to be a place where knowledge is uncovered, that people be able to speak. And it's just, it is one of the, if you just make a very small list of the grounding values, that's got to be one of them.
Yeah. And obviously we're very committed to that.
Yeah.
You can't have a robust democracy unless you can have
Absolutely.
Robust debate and discussion. It does come up from time to time, students who feel
Sure.
personally hurt by, threatened by views. What say you to them?
I think that I can understand why that would be, why they would feel that way. And people do say hurtful things. It's important to be part of the dialogue and to talk to people who are saying those kinds of things and share your ideas. Get in there and share your ideas. Mm-hmm. That's the way to try to get to the truth, and also to try to get to the truth, because it's a constant journey, but to try to get to it is through dialogue. Yeah.
In your inaugural address, you talked a lot about engagement, and engagement as being a founding principle of the University of Chicago, William Rainey Harper being the first president. And you said, I would also like to address why now is the right time, in fact, is imperative that we fully engage with the world around us. Well, we had a little bit of that discussion at the beginning today. And I will note that when you and I were students here, I'm not sure that was the governing principle.
It didn't feel that way, yeah.
No, it didn't. I mean, we heard a lot about the life of the mind and very little about the life of the world and certainly the community around us. Why is it it's so important to you that the university be outward facing in more of the Harper tradition?
Yeah. Well, so it really does mean a great deal to me. And it's because of the moment we find ourselves in historically. We have just multiple interlocking crises. Unfortunately, we talked about one of them at the beginning of this session, where we have a public health epidemic of violence that we're dealing with. But we also have a situation, we talked about climate change. We know that there are true crises that are related to the massive inequality in our society. We're having challenges of democratic erosion around the world. There are multiple crises that are interlocking. And so I think for places like this, where the creation of new ideas is so fertile, and the possibilities for the solutions to be found are so strong, we'll be better at what we do by being engaged on these topics. I want to emphasize, as I tried to in my remarks, that I do believe that to be engaged, we have to begin by still pursuing knowledge for its own sake. But at the same time, we have to be aware of how we can partner with others to help be a part of addressing these really major issues in the world. And I think that that was in Harper's vision. It really, truly was there. And it stayed for a period of time, but then it kind of, it's oscillated a little bit, but it got lost. And over a number of years now, it's been coming back.
Yes.
And I think this is a moment for us to do it because of all these crises.
Yeah, well, I'd like to think the Institute of Politics is part of that
Yeah, totally.
revival. So, a little commercial there, sorry. We have microphones set up on either side, so if you have questions, please feel free to stand up. There's no names will be taken by the president as to who stands up and what questions they ask, but feel free to come on either side of the either side of the platform. When you think about your tenure here, how are you going to measure success? What will be your what is your hope that people will say of the years that you put in here?
Well, I really hope that people will feel like it was a moment when that vision of how to be truly great at the creation and the sharing of knowledge also found its kind of accompaniment in terms of a mindset, a way of thinking, and a set of partnerships around how to be engaged with the society around us in a way that is exemplary. I think that's that to me, if that happens in a broad way across the university, then that would have been going back to this beautiful vision of Harper's. That would be a wonderful thing. There are specific things we could talk about. Some of the challenges we just talked about are ones that are going to be with us for a long time. But if we make that kind of change in our minds and really become strong at doing this, then that will have been a big development. I'll have felt like that was a great accomplishment.
I sat in this room on a panel. You were here at the 10th anniversary of the Pritzker Institute of Molecular Engineering. And I was sort of astonished. I feel embarrassed that I haven't done more research in that area. But but just at the scope of the work that they're
Yeah,
doing
exciting.
on real fundamental societal problems across a whole range of.
It's wonderful, and for example, there's who knew that there would be a field called Immuno Engineering, and yet it's been there here at the University of Chicago for a few years now, and that's the kind of thing we need to really be able to approach problems like future pandemics that we may have to grapple with, or even all kinds of health-related problems, the quantum information science that's just taking off, and all of the science and engineering that will relate to sustainable materials and sustainable energy. Those are just a few of the areas where that field is involved in. Just as a quick little anecdote, when I was at Berkeley and around the time that this was first still being considered, I remember getting a note saying, the University of Chicago is considering molecular engineering. And I remember holding that thing, it was a piece of paper, I remember holding that thing and thinking, wow, how can those words even all be on the same page? University of Chicago, molecular engineering, it was like, this should just, this page should explode just based on what the university had been like when we were students. It's amazing how much the journey has been.
Yeah.
How wonderful that journey has been.
Are you worried that you're going to feel an uncontrollable impulse to go over there and roll up your sleeves and say, let me help out over here. Let me get under the hood. I noted that that someone from the Institute, Wanda Pablo or somebody said, we now have a president who can do what we do better than we do it.
Not likely. They're darn good at what they do. No, I'm not going to try and tell them how to do their job, but I'm going to partner with them for sure, yeah.
We've got
some questions here. Great.
Hello, thank you so much for being with us today. My name's Olivia, and I'm a second year in the college. I'm sure you've heard with the announcement of the University of Austin on the topic of the Chicago principles. Sorry to be the one to ask this question. But I'm curious to hear from you what the ongoing association with so much University of Chicago affiliated staff being involved in the project, but also on your thoughts on how it might affect the state of the Chicago principles on our campus in a positive or negative light.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I'm aware of the announcement, and that, so look, the free expression principles, the Chicago principles, are a very deep part of this university and will continue to be so. And, look, I think I don't know much about that university. I know that they're drawn to the fact, I know that when they've thought about wanting to promote free expression, they have sought to talk with this people here at this university about free expression. And I'm not surprised, because this is a place that has upheld those principles very, very strongly. And we'll continue to do that here. I can't speak to what's going to happen there. That's not something I could really know.
I did say, my first reaction, Olivia, was finally a university we could beat in football. Oh, I'm sorry.
Here. Yeah, sorry.
Sorry about that.
All good. My name's Andrew. I'm a fourth year in the college. Again, thank you so much.
Hey, would you tell me what you're majoring in?
I'm an econ and public policy double major.
Econ and?
Public policy.
Public policy, thank you.
Yeah, as I'm sure you know, here at the Institute of Politics, we think a lot about the political climate today, and often there are debates here about the nature of truth, especially considering the outcome of the 2020 election. I'm curious to hear what role you think science and universities have to play in sort of course correcting and ensuring that the truth prevails at the end of the day in a political sense.
Well, gee, that's a big question. Thank you. While I'm trying to think through how to answer that question, I will say that it's fascinating to me, compared to when we were students, that most students that I meet now are double and even sometimes triple majoring and so on, and I'm in awe of this of the students today.
You probably would have gotten in here back in the day. I don't think you would have.
I don't think that's actually true. No, I don't think so. No. Look, in the political world, the truth, to my understanding of things, David, you can jump in here, is really like it is in a lot of topics. We arrive at it through debate and dialogue. I mean, that's just the nature of the political process, and we have to accept it for what it is. But I do think that a university that promotes rigorous scholarship, tries to understand the reasons why, engages in open debate, that we can become a place that's a part of helping our society to have those debates in a way that is reasoned, that models good discourse, that goes back to trying to really argue from the facts and so on. That we have a special role in society to uphold those values, to model them, and to carry them into our engagement with society. And the more that we do that, the better things will be.
You know, this goes to the question that I asked earlier, because there are facts, there is truth, but what we are contending with in our democracy and what you do in autocracies is if truth and facts are disrespected, if there is an official version of or alternative facts, or that is, then we're in trouble. If we can't have reasoned debate and discourse if people have alternative sets of facts and alternative truth. We can argue over facts and what we should do about them. We can argue over truth.
Yeah.
And this is where the technology has been, if you have algorithms driving people to conspiracy theories and disinformation, that is a big challenge.
It is.
I'm hoping some of these really, really smart people here can help us develop strategies to repel that so that we can, as a society, argue over a common set of facts and truth.
Well, as you know, new forms of sharing information have been created before and have often precipitated these periods where there's a kind of massive jump in misinformation. I don't know that I could speak to whether this moment is completely different than others or not, but it is a period of a lot of change because we have the ability for information to flow differently than it did before.
Well, and more rapidly.
More rapidly, and also differently because it's, any person can become a source for many others in a way that wasn't as possible with some of the previous technologies. So it is challenging us, and I think the way to deal with that is to really grapple with it in a university like this. I'm not sure I could answer all the questions. We have wonderful people in Harris and our philosophy department and lots of other places who can help us be part of a dialogue around trying to understand how are we going to cope through this big challenge.
Yeah. No, I think it's a big one.
It's a big one.
Yes.
It's a big one.
I think we owe this side a question.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I'm Eric. I'm a third year. I'm studying law, letters, and society and computer science. My question makes very little sense, but it's okay.
No, it actually is perfect, beautiful.
My question is about how you're thinking about the balance between this practical engagement that you talked about with opportunities like molecular engineering and the Institute of Politics with UChicago's consistent ethos related to theory. And if you think there's a tension there and what that will look like in the coming years.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that let's say, for example, if we tried to imagine working on a problem of so-called big data, where there's a huge amount of data, right? And I would say that, to be successful at that, and there are all these ideas now around artificial intelligence and machine learning and all these kinds of ways to handle those and so on. If we don't have a context for those that arises from the kind of underlying theoretical concepts of the discipline that that data comes from, we won't be very successful at actually really making that data truly the source of knowledge or meaning. And so I think the orientation of this university around theory is just right. It's part of this desire to really understand at the deepest level. And remember, I'm saying our engagement begins with creating knowledge for its own sake. It has to start with that, just like we have to start by understanding the grounding principles of theory that apply in each discipline. But once we have those, we should be mindful if we have a new approach to data. Like you're going to be thinking about law and computer science. You're going to be thinking differently than legal scholars or than others have before. My hope would be that when you're out in the world, if you don't stay in the university, if you're out in the world, that you'll bring that theory orientation, but also be engaged on the practical issues that really matter in the world. So we want to do it all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
My name's Karen, class of 1980, University of Illinois, Champaign.
Beautiful.
I was really struck by your dormitory situation at the Shoreland.
Mm-hmm.
I find that fascinating.
It was fascinating.
In the late 70s, 2 floors of students and then single apartments for the community. I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts about that kind of an interaction with the community. You were talking about how things were so much different at U of C in the 70s.
Yeah.
But wow, that was really out there, to put the students in
Yeah.
with the community. Just wondering what
I
your
will
thoughts
say,
are.
yeah, no, thank you for mentioning that. I mean, it wasn't especially intentional by the university, right? I mean, in fact, what ultimately happened was by, I think, either the next year or the year after that, it was entirely a dormitory. So it was this very brief moment when this happened because the real estate had just, the deal had just converged and there was only time to do a certain number of floors and there were a lot of us, and they, so some of us had the, that's where, I was placed. It was a really interesting experience. I mean, I think it was interesting. I don't know if it's a good design principle for what the dormitory should be like. So much has changed in the years since here at the university. For example, when I've been to the dormitories or the dining halls, and like Nicole and I sometimes go to dining halls, and they have people are seated by house, and then they sort of meet the students, and they talk about their houses and so on. We didn't have a house, we didn't think that way at all. So, I mean, the whole nature of how the university has organized the experiences for students, I think, has been thought through much more deeply in the intervening years and is very successful. But I will say that there are lots of opportunities, so many more than when we were students, systematically, and you've been involved in some of those through IOP, there are systematic opportunities for our college students to be involved in Chicago, in the community, in projects. And I think that's a good way to do it. And they're doing a lot of it, and if some of you here are probably involved in that, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I will say I'm not at all bitter about this, but my dormitory was raised so they could build a business school. Mm-hmm. So anyway, go ahead.
It was an upgrade, though.
A big upgrade, yes. My dorm wasn't quite as nice as Booth.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
Hello, my name is Alexandra. I'm a 4th year sociology and global studies double major and 4th year in the college. I'm Greek American, and you discussed your upbringing in Athens, but I was wondering what role your Greek American identity has kind of played more broadly in your life and how you hope to engage with the Greek American community on campus.
Well, I mean, thank you for asking that. I mean, it was, I got so much out of my experience in Greece, and that has stayed with me for life. But I will say that I've been less engaged so, we each do different things in life, and I've been less engaged with the kind of Greek American community than, for example, my sister, who I mentioned to you, in this discussion earlier, is quite a bit older than me, and she's been extremely involved in that. And for me, life has kind of taken me into directions where there have been so many other things going on that hasn't really been a huge part of my life. But I know there's a vibrant and wonderful Greek American community here in Chicago, so that's a great thing.
Thank you.
Hi, Konstantinos. I'm a third-year PhD in the CS department.
In CS?
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you think are the 3 biggest challenges for UChicago today?
The 3 biggest challenges for UChicago today. Thank you. Wow. We've kind of been frontlining what I consider to be the kind of meta challenge, which is how to become an engaged university, and that, to me, is profound. So I think that's huge. And I would say part of that, which I would consider to be a second one, is becoming really a strong partner with the community that surrounds us. I'd like the university to become great at doing that. So that's 2. How about if I stick with 2?
Thank you.
Yeah.
I see here on the screen a question from Xavier Owens. It says on YouTube, but I think it means YouTube. Have you had a promising impact on communities of color?
Well, thank you for the question. I've only been here at this university for a short time, so I can say that I worked really hard as provost at Berkeley to partner with the many communities around Berkeley, but also to help to do everything I knew how to help improve the diversity of our campus at Berkeley. And I worked very hard on issues related to faculty diversity. And I think we ended up finding some ways to improve faculty diversity and also to improve the climate and experiences of the faculty of color at the university that really did work well. So I'm very proud of the work that I did in that regard.
And how will that translate here, that experience?
Well, I think we have, I think we need to really, as our community here needs to really work on these issues related to diversity at all levels and to creating an environment of belonging. One of the things that we did, for example, at Berkeley was we created a kind of faculty link network for faculty members of color on the campus that created a kind of mentorship network that really made their experiences better, did many other things that worked well. I think some of those practices are ones that might translate here. At this point, I'm still in the learning phase of what all is going on. You can't just come in and say, let's do this, this, and this without becoming aware of all the things that are already going on. So I'm still in that phase. But I do want to say that this is something which I really want to work with all of you here on to do a lot. There's a lot of work for us to do.
Just to harken back to a question I asked before, do you see any tension? I mean, I'm not suggesting an answer. Do you see any tension between the goal of creating an environment in which diverse populations feel equally valued in the community and free expression?
Well, I think actually they should be able to work together well. Are there ever challenges? Of course, if we look at a specific situation, it can be. But I actually really believe that the two go together, and absent either one, you will not have a great university.
Yes.
Good evening. Thank you both for your time tonight. Earlier today, not too far away from here, there was a fatal shooting of a former student of the university.
Yeah.
Over the last year, there's been multiple other violent criminal incidents involving students, and this is all in the context of rising violent crime rates in Chicago and many other large cities in the United States.
Yes.
So, without trying to sound too horrible and dire, I would like to know if so, what plans of actions or proposals the university has to work both within Hyde Park and the larger Chicago community to address this obvious worsening problem of security and public safety.
I should just say, everybody's got schedules, but President Alivisatos, we started on this subject because it was, stunning news today, and so he's spoken a bit to it. So if he's brief in his answer here, that will be why.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I want you to know that we're going to step up and do more around public safety. And I spoke with the mayor earlier today, and will again tomorrow, and I'll be announcing a series of steps that we'll take.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Dinesh, and I'm a fourth-year BA Masters in Public Policy student here. I just had a question for you generally about what's your favorite thing about the university, Hyde Park, or Chicago more broadly, whether that be an element, whether that be a place, a restaurant, take it as you may.
My favorite thing about the university is, I'm sorry, you're not going to like it when I say this because it sounds kind of silly, but I just love the style of the university, the way, the kind of conversation we're having, the questions that we're getting, the give and take, the fact that it's a place where that kind of debate is the natural thing. It makes me feel very much at home, and I really love it.
I was interested before that you said that you try and learn something new every day.
Every day. And
I see Nicole sitting over there. If you were sitting up here, I'd ask what conversation was like over at your place. Does he bring these ideas home every night? And yes.
My name's Eric. I'm a staff member and lived in Hyde Park for about 20 years.
Yeah.
And apologies, this is an expansion of the last question on public safety.
Yeah.
But you mentioned at the beginning it's a pandemic. And I'm thinking if you take that literally, and a bit of a tangent, but...
Well, I said it's a crisis of similar scale.
Right. So,
yeah.
for example,
Right.
MIT, I haven't followed closely, but they've sort of put a stake in the ground like they're going to solve climate change. If the University of Chicago said we're going to solve this pandemic, what would that mean? If we altered our behavior as much as we did for the COVID pandemic, hundreds of millions of dollars, faculty changed their research programs. Is something of that scale possible, necessary? Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. Look, it's a really important issue for society and for us, and so we do have to have a response that's commensurate to the challenge of it. But I will say, I love MIT, and I think it's an awesome place. But I think we're going to help them solve climate change too. We're going to be a part of that, and I suspect they're going to be part of helping us think about how to do other things. So, I don't think we can say, the one thing that the university is going to do is going to be probably almost anything. We have to have a range of things like that. But certainly, this is a big problem, and we know that it's a hard and very serious problem, and today brings home just how deep it is. So I do think we need to really, we do need to bring our thinking to a higher level on it to try to be a part of finding a better approaches to it. Yeah.
And you said earlier, and I think you're so right, that you need to bring all the stakeholders in to marshal the resources and ideas that it'll take.
Yeah.
It can't just be the university. There's one last question here relative to this, which I know is something that a lot of students will ask, is how can University of Chicago keep its students safe without over-policing neighbors?
Mm-hmm. Well, look, we want to be partners with our neighbors in thinking about how to approach the problem, and I certainly will approach it that way. And I spent a lot of time already today with various community leaders talking about things like this. So, and it's not just policing. You know, there are many aspects to the violence problem. Has many, many dimensions to it. And only one part of that has to do with policing. There are many other parts to it. So we'll approach it in a broad way.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time, especially on a challenging day. And we all welcome you.
Thank you.
All our hopes and dreams are resting on your shoulders. So
no. Thank you. It's great to be back.
It's great to have you back. Thank you so much.
All right, thanks a lot.